I'm going to tell you a wee bit about the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. The first thing I suppose to say is, why are pollinators so important to us in Ireland? And there's three big reasons, I suppose. The first one is the economy. We know that bees, the free service that bees provide, is worth 53 million a year to the Irish economy. That's just in terms of the crops that they pollinate. You can break it down by individual crops. So we know they're worth £7 million a year, just apples in the north. That's just in terms of the crops they pollinate. If we lost pollinators, we couldn't replace them. So in that respect, they're priceless. And interestingly, with this, both the volume and the amount of pollinator-dependent crops that we're growing is increasing all the time. But at the same time, we're seeing declines in the bees themselves. The second reason they're so important, really, is health and well-being. There's 100 crops that provide 90% of the food that we eat, and 71 of those are pollinated by bees. That's a lot. So really, without pollinators, we wouldn't starve, but it'd be very, very hard to have a healthy, balanced diet. It's the fruit and vegetables, mainly, that are being pollinated by insects. And this slide just shows you, I like it because I think it brings it home to you what it would actually mean to me and you. It shows you a supermarket. So this is a supermarket, and it shows you your produce choice with bees, and then I'll show you your produce choice without bees, and you'll see the difference. So that's with, and then this is without. So you can see the difference that it would make to us in terms of our diet. And also, for generation upon generation, we would have grown our own fruit and vegetables in Ireland. We don't do it so much anymore, and that's fine. We go to the supermarket. But, I think, or I feel strongly anyway, that we should protect our ability to do that, whether or not we actually want to do it or not. That we should protect our ability to grow our own fruit and vegetables, both for ourselves and also for future generations. So that's just my own garden at home. It's a small urban garden, but I like to grow a whole lot of different stuff, not very much of anything. I can't grow any of those unless bees are also visiting my garden. And then also wildlife and landscape, and sometimes this gets overlooked a wee bit. In Ireland, we know that 78% of our wild plants also need to be pollinated by insects. So it's simplistic to show it, but without them, the landscape would look totally different. It would be a lot less colourful, a lot less attractive for us. And those bees, they're pollinating the wild plants. Those wild plants provide fruits and seeds for our birds, our mammals. So really, in protecting pollinators, you do protect the whole environment. And also, obviously, that benefits tourism, and it also helps to market our produce abroad. And I suppose the other thing is, there's lots and lots of components of our biodiversity that are really important. I always think if I had to stand up here and try to sell an All-Ireland worm plan or an All-Ireland fly plan, it'd be a totally different ballgame. Bees are really important because they let you sell a message. It's a simple message that you can sell, but the actions that you take for bees or pollinators, they're also going to benefit biodiversity generally. So really, without pollinators, there'd be less diversity on your dinner plates and less colour in the countryside. So, who are the pollinators in Ireland? Well, we know that about 80% of pollination is carried out by bees. And the rest then is by various other insects that visit flowers. And in Ireland, we've got 99 different types of bee. So we've got the honeybee, and we've got 21 different kinds of bumblebees, and 77 different kinds of solitary bees. So bumblebees and solitary bees, they're the wild pollinators. And, in the past, I think people thought, if there's a problem, sure, we'll just bring in more hives. And what's very clear now is that just wouldn't solve the problem. So we know that in the UK, if they used all their hives just for crop pollination, they only provide about a third of the service that's needed. And it's the wild bees that are providing the rest. So really, to maintain pollination, we need healthy honeybees, but we also need an abundance and diversity of wild bees, as well as other insect pollinators. So, with bumblebees, we've got 21 different kinds in Ireland. I think unless you've, been looking at them, you probably don't realise the diversity that we do have. So 21, all different colour patterns, beautiful insects. And most of us probably have 5 or 6 in our gardens, once you start looking. There's 20 there. Those 20 all nest on the surface of the ground, so they make their nest on the surface of the ground or just underneath. A new bumblebee arrived in Ireland just last September. This one is called the tree bumblebee. So it nests in a slightly different way. So traditionally it would have nested in hollows in trees, but what it's been doing in Britain is using bird boxes. So people are putting up bird boxes for their blue tits or whatever, and finding that it's actually, the tree bumblebee is using it to nest. So, I'd love that in my garden. I hope we're going to start seeing that, over the years to come. going to tell you a wee bit about bumblebees' life cycle, just so that you understand what it is that they need, because then it's easier to understand, how to help them. So with bumblebees, the queen comes out of hibernation in early spring. From now, actually, usually around late February, early March. Let's hope they didn't attempt anything, over the last week or two. But from now, you start seeing, big bumblebee queens coming out of hibernation. They feed and then they find somewhere to make a nest. And what the queen does, once she's found somewhere to make a nest, she goes out and collects as much pollen as she can, and she makes it into like a wee loaf, like a loaf of bread, but made out of pollen, and she leaves that in the nest, and she also makes a little wax pot, and she fills it with nectar. So once she's done that, she'll lay some fertilised eggs. She fertilised them with sperm that she stored from the previous autumn. So she lays the fertilised eggs, they become female workers, they emerge, take over the nest duties. Queen stays in the nest, laying more eggs. In mid to late summer, what she does is she lets some new queens develop, and she also lays some unfertilised eggs, and they become males. So the new queens and the males will leave the nest and try to find mates. The mated new queen, she has to fatten up before going into hibernation, and then everyone else dies off. So the old queen, all the female workers, all the males, they all die. It's just the mated new queen then that hibernates over the winter. I always say you might see these boys here, no help with housework, only interested in chasing girls and out drinking nectar. Thank God it's not like that for us. But, with bumblebees, you can see there that they need somewhere to nest, they need somewhere to hibernate, and then they need food right throughout the year. So saying, most of our bumblebees nest on the surface of the ground or just underneath, so they really just need long grass. They hibernate, they burrow in underground to hibernate. They just burrow down, 8-10 centimetres down, and they tend to use north-facing slopes for that, just so they don't get the winter sun and think it's spring too soon. But the most important thing is that they need food. So they need food right throughout the year. And, we've got better at trying to provide food for bees in the landscape, but we tend to do it when we see them. So we tend to do it in the spring, summer, when we see bees. We need to just not forget about the other two ends of the life cycle. In early spring, that's when those new queens come out of hibernation. We know this is the buff-tailed bumblebee, so the most common bumblebee that we have in Ireland. And we know that one buff-tailed bumblebee queen has to visit about 6,000 flowers every day just to get enough energy to maintain the heat to brood that first batch of eggs. That's a phenomenal amount of flowers to have to visit in a single day. So things like willow, dandelion, really, really important, to have in the landscape at that time of year for them to feed on. And then also in the autumn, we need to just not forget them in the autumn. And again, that's again with the buff-tailed bumblebee. As an example, we know that a queen buff-tailed bumblebee has to weigh about 0.6 grams to successfully hibernate. Sounds like nothing to us, but that's chunky if you're a bumblebee. So again, really important that there's plenty of stuff for them to feed on in the autumn so they can fatten up to successfully hibernate. And things like ivy, really, really important. Say a wee tiny bit about our solitary bees, so 77 different kinds. Again, an amazing diversity of types, and I suppose most people wouldn't really be aware of them once you get your eye and you do see them, they're out there all the time. But yeah, lots and lots of different kinds, types, beautiful insects. We have some posters here that you can have a look at if you want to see after. It shows you all, all 99 different bees that we have in Ireland. Solitary bees have a simpler life cycle. So the males and females emerge in spring. They mate. The female makes a nest. She lays eggs, and then she leaves a food supply of pollen. And most of the solitary bees that we have in Ireland are called mining solitary bees, so they nest by making a wee tiny burrow into bare soil. So something like that. So they make a little tiny burrow into bare soil, and in that they'll have different cells, and in each cell they lay a fertilised egg, and then they go out and collect as much pollen and nectar as they can, make it into a little ball of food, and they leave it beside the fertilised egg, and then they close off that cell. And they might do that 8 or 10 times. Once they're happy with that, then they close the whole nest off. The males and the females die. The larvae will overwinter and eat the food supply that the mother has left for them, and then they'll emerge again the next spring as adults. So solitary bees also need somewhere to nest, and they need food sources to be able to provision that nest when they come out of hibernation. So what do solitary bees need? And I was saying most of our solitary bees nest just on bare soil, so that's all they need. either bare soil that's flat or a south or east facing bank. So there's pictures there of the kind of things. Sometimes people think it must be really complicated. It couldn't be easier, to be honest. And it couldn't be easier to create it just by going out with a spade and scraping back vegetation to create areas of bare soil. And that's really all they need. If you create that, they will come and nest. We then have, so most solitary bees nest like that. We've got another 15 species that are cavity nesters. So they nest in existing cavities, either in wood or concrete or masonry. This is a wall in Waterford. I'm sure lots and lots of people walk past so they don't notice anything. But, if you walk past in summer and have a closer look, the whole thing is just buzzing with solitary bees, coming and going, provisioning their nest. So really, they're totally unobtrusive. They don't need very much. Very, very easy to help them. Very easy to provide those nest sites that they need. And you can also create bee boxes. So some of you might have seen bee boxes that you can buy commercially. They are targeting these cavity nesting solitary bees. And again, you can make them yourselves, really just by drilling holes in a piece of wood, or by putting together hollow stems like bamboo or something. This one, the most common the cavity nesting solitary bee that uses bee boxes are called leaf cutter bees, and they line the cells of the nest with pieces of leaf. So you might have seen, I'll show you this picture. You might have seen these bees actually flying back, so they cut a piece of leaf out with their jaws, and then they bring it back to the nest and use it to line the cells. You do see it, and it's amazing to see, this bee carrying back this big piece of leaf. Or sometimes you might see in your garden, I've got a rose out the front, and you can see circular bits cut out of the petals, where they're doing that and bringing it back to line their nest. With just one thing to say about these solitary bee boxes. Some of them can be absolutely enormous. Some of them you'd nearly wonder if you need planning permission, to be honest. And, big isn't better with these. Really, those two, this one down here, or this box, that's sort of the perfect size for them. The bigger you go, the more disease risk there is, and also the more predation that you'll get. So smaller, and a larger number of smaller ones is much better than a big, giant one. So really, to ensure pollination of crops and wild plants, we need healthy honeybees, but we also need an abundance and diversity of wild pollinators. Are they declining? Unfortunately, they are. More than half have undergone substantial declines since the 1980s. 2 species have gone extinct. And really, of those 98 wild bees that we have, 1/3 are threatened with extinction. So there's a huge problem. This is the great yellow bumblebee, so it's probably our most threatened bumblebee. A stunning looking bee, really blonde. We're down to a couple of healthy populations of this one remaining. And I used to get asked, what do you think the outlook is? And I'd have to be honest, and I say it doesn't look all that good, to be totally honest. But just last month, Mayo County Council agreed to adopt the great yellow bumblebee, and that's a really positive thing. And if they can take steps, to boost the local populations, that would have an enormously positive impact. So when I'm asked now, I think, the outlook for the great yellow bumblebee is a lot more positive. And I should just say thanks to Peter Gill, who's really been the driving force behind that. So why are pollinators declining? There's nothing complicated. They're like ourselves. They need somewhere safe to live and enough food to feed themselves and their families, and that's just what's not there anymore. So there's not enough safe places to nest. There's not enough food for them to eat in the landscape. We've also inadvertently introduced pests and disease. That's more of an issue for honeybees. And we do use pesticides that can make it difficult for them to complete their life cycle. But really the main driving factor is hunger. And wild bees don't make honey, so they have no way of storing food. So really, it's true to say they're never more than a couple of days away from starvation. So it's so important that there's a continual supply of flowers in the landscape for them to feed on, right from when they come out of hibernation until they go back into it again. So what can we do? I think we have to accept that pollination is important to us, and then we have to recognise that we have a problem. And after that, I think you either bury your head in the sand or you try to do something. And the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan was about saying, enough's enough. Let's come together and try to build some sort of positive framework for moving forward. So the plan was published in September 2015. It's developed by a 15-member steering group. And we didn't have to do it, so it came from the ground up. And I suppose once you start, you don't know how much support there's going to be for it. But really, we were overwhelmed by the amount of support that it did get. So over 80 governmental and non-governmental organisations have agreed to support it. And it's identified 81 actions to try and make Ireland a bit more pollinator friendly again. And again, those 80 plus organisations, they're all sorts. It's government departments, national level organisations, charities and NGOs, transport authorities, all sorts, really across all sectors. And that's been a really, really positive part of the plan so far. And with the plan, it's about looking at the landscape. It's about looking at every single scrap of land that there is out there and saying, can we make changes? Can we make small changes to make that a place that's a bit more pollinator friendly, a place where bees can survive and thrive again? So you want to try and make farmland more pollinator friendly, public land more pollinator friendly, and then also private land more pollinator friendly. So most of the actions in the plan are focused around that. We also need to raise awareness, whether we like it or not. There's not great awareness within the public of the number of pollinators that we have, the issues that they face, or what you could do to help. So there's a big task in terms of raising awareness. We also need to support beekeepers who have, managed honeybees. We need to keep on doing research to make sure we're doing the right thing. And then we need to track and collect evidence, see if what we're doing is actually working. So the plan has a steering group who oversee it, and then implementation is coordinated by the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And, it is very much an all-Ireland plan, and that's very important to all of us that are involved in it. And it is totally about the two jurisdictions coming together and, sharing leadership, sharing knowledge, sharing expertise, sharing resources to try and solve a problem. And hopefully you'll see today, we've got speakers both from the north and the south, and it really is about that sharing knowledge, sharing expertise, saying we have a problem, let's come together and try to solve it. So if you want to help implement the pollinator plan, really the most important thing you can do is to think about what site you might have some responsibility for. And then, is there food, shelter and safety for bees there? And if there's not, are there changes that you could make to ensure that there are? And the site could be anything. It could be a park that you have responsibility for, a roadside verge, it could be your own garden at home, it could be a church, it could be a National Trust property, an OPW property, a school. It could be anything, any single piece of land. We need to target them all. So it's about thinking what land you have some responsibility for, and can you ensure there's food, shelter and safety there for bees? Safety is just either using pesticides sustainably or not at all. Shelter is, bumblebees, they nest in long grass, so if it's about thinking about your site, whether it's a park, a garden, a school, is there long grass there? If there's not, are there areas where you could create it? Again, the mine and silage bees, they just need areas of bare soil. Is that there already, or could you go out with a spade and create a bit? And again, the cavity nesters, they just need existing cavities. Could you go out and drill a few holes in wood or put up a few bee boxes? And then food, and it's about thinking, I always think it's about thinking as if you were a bee, and looking out and saying, if I was a bee, is there something here for me to eat? And there has to be something for them to eat right from spring through into the autumn. So there's no point in having fantastic stuff in July, if that's all you have. You need to make sure that there's a continual supply of food on the site from spring right through into the autumn. And there's lots of things that are good for bees. I suppose the important thing to say is, if we had to eat the same 4 or 5 things day in, day out, our health would suffer, and bees are no different. So they need to have a healthy, balanced diet. So it's really important that there's a lot of different kinds of flowers in the landscape for them to feed on. Native plants are best, obviously, and there are lots of native plants that are very good for pollinators. But you can also plant in horticultural things, that are really good sources of pollen and nectar. I'll just say a wee tiny bit about the native plants first, and sometimes people say, sure, I don't know anything about plants, I wouldn't know where to start. But if you have a site and it had flower and hedgerows, you'll naturally start seeing, those native species. If you allow some grassy banks or verges to be there, you'll naturally start seeing those species. If you've got meadows or area of long grass, you'll naturally start seeing those plants. Edges of tracks, that you're not spraying, you'll see plants like those. And again, if you've got wilder corners, depending on where the site is, you'll start seeing other plants. So with the native plants, it's just about changing the management a wee bit to allow those plants to naturally grow. And then there's deliberate planting you can do, in your garden, in a park, in a school. Lots of things that are very good for bees, trees and shrubs, herbs, lots of perennials. Peter Cuthbert will talk more about this later on, but I suppose the main thing to say is that a lot of what we plant isn't good. So the annual bedding plants that are very common, they're kind of like plastic flowers, to be honest, if you're a bee. They're not good sources of pollen and nectar. So it's not that there's not a place for them, but it's about saying, can we change a proportion of them into things that would look just as good, cost the same, but would also provide pollen and nectar for pollinators. And we do have a pollinator-friendly planting code with lists and lists of bulbs, annuals, perennials, trees and shrubs, climbers, that are pollinator-friendly. If you're interested, you can have a look and see, which ones would be good to buy if you want to. So really with the pollinator plan, it's about all coming together, to create these networks to change the way the landscape looks. This is just an example map of Waterford, but you'd hope that maybe the council could take some actions. Schools could do some things, residents associations, people in their gardens, businesses, religious properties even, local tidy towns groups, community groups. So if everyone's doing a wee bit, together, the impact of that could be enormous. If we can make our urban areas a bit more pollinator friendly, make our roadside verges, our road networks, our rail networks, greenways a bit more pollinator friendly, and then make farmland a wee bit more pollinator friendly, it does open up the whole landscape so the bees can start using it again, and then they'll be there to provide the service that we rely on. This is the large Carter bee, gorgeous looking bee, really blonde. It's really threatened across Europe, actually. It's vulnerable on the European Red List. It's been doing okay in Ireland, but shown declines recently. But in Waterford, if I wanted to see it, I know I'd have to go down to the coast, to some of the nice coastal sites of Tramore or Anstown down there. But Waterford County Council developed a nature park on an old landfill site, I suppose 4 or 5 years ago in the city, and they planted up on top big meadows, just clover and birdsfoot trefoil. And in the last couple of years, this species has been turning up, in those meadows. They're not very fancy, to be honest, but there are flowers there now for bees to feed on. And it just shows you, if you put the resources back that they need, then the bees will help themselves. So what we've been doing within the All Ireland Pollinator Plan is trying to publish evidence-based actions on how you can help. So it's one thing saying, everyone needs to help, unless you actually tell people what it is that you're asking them to do. So we wanted to publish really clear documents to show you how to help if you want to. So we published a junior All Ireland Pollinator Plan, so that's exact same as the adult one, but written for children. And then we've been publishing these guideline documents for different sectors. So we've got one for farmland, councils, local communities, businesses, gardens. There's copies of them all here today if you want to have a look and take some away with you. Important thing to say about these is that they're all evidence-based. So we didn't sit around and think, that might work. These are things that scientific studies have shown will actually work. So they're all evidence-based. The sector is fed in each time, so we consult a lot with councils, for example, before we, finalise the one for councils. And we're trying to communicate it then, hopefully, in the right way each time. There's more in development. I think it's a bit never-ending now, to be honest. When you start, you think, there's only a few that we'll have to do. And now, because more and more people hear about the plan and they want to help, this guideline development has turned into a never-ending saga, to be honest. But so there's a few more in development at the minute for horticulture, transport authorities, which was the main one always, and religious properties. And then we're starting a new mini-series for things like solar farms, wind farms, pump houses, you name it, it's being covered. So I'd say 10 years' time we'll still be talking about these guidelines. But anyway, within each of the documents, there's lots of options. So one local community is not like another in the same way that one council is not like another. So in each one, there's lots and lots of different options. The idea is that you look at all the things that you could do, and then you pick what works best for you. We've got a separate how-to series for some of the more complicated actions. Again, we've got copies of those here today. What we've been trying to do then is, once you have these guideline documents as to what it is that you should do, is to use existing networks to try and encourage implementation and roll out. That's efficient, it's also cost effective, and hopefully then it beds it down within existing structures. And just to say, I suppose, a wee tiny bit about funding for the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, because I think sometimes people think that we have lots and lots of funding, whereas couldn't be further from the truth, to be honest. So it is very much run on a shoestring. At the minute, we're trying to get agreement that we'll have funding for a project officer position for this year. Department of Agriculture have given us a small promotional budget the last 2 years and again this year, and actually that's been invaluable in terms of being able to develop these resources. But really that's it then. There isn't a project budget. So there is huge scope. I suppose we never envisaged there being a project budget, to be honest. what we wanted to happen was that maybe perhaps sectors would get behind the plan and then make funding available for us to work with that sector. So there is huge scope. We've got the structure. There's an enormous amount of support and an enormous amount of enthusiasm. So I suppose with funding from different sectors, whether it's local authorities, whether it's businesses, whatever it happens to be, there's so much that we could do to better support that sector in taking action for pollinators. So, we're using these existing networks. So, for example, with the junior pollinator plan, been working with green schools and eco schools in the north. With gardens, we've been trying to liaise with, Grow It Yourself or Irish Garden Plant Society and so on, or attend the right events. With businesses, we're working with Origin Green or business in the community, both north and south. With farms, again, working with all the most important players on that. The Department of Agriculture is in both jurisdictions, Origin Green. I'm not going to say about farmland today, other than that obviously it's an incredibly important sector. Most of Ireland is farms, so we have to be able to have some impact on farmland if we want the plan to be a success. But that's a whole other day's work. Local communities, I just want to say a tiny bit about local communities, because one really successful initiative with that has been an award in the Tidy Towns competition in the Republic. So the Biodiversity and Heritage Officer Network came together and they put money into a pot, and then they used it to fund a pollinator award in the Tidy Towns competition. And credit to Dervla Ledwidge and Kathy Fisher particularly, who really were the driving force behind this and making it happen. So I can't tell you how positive it's been, honestly. And if I think back to Tidy Towns 10 years ago and the change that some of them have made in more recent times, it really has been amazing. Just last year we had 70 entries in the Pollinator Award within Tidy Towns. Some of them just doing the most amazing stuff, within the local area to make them more pollinator friendly. And I suppose what was really positive last year was that some of the towns that were winning the Pollinator Award were also doing really well in the Tidy Towns itself. So it's not about going wild. There's no reason why you can't look as neat and tidy as it needs to be, but also be pollinator friendly. And again, just to say again, this award in Tidy Towns has been really, really positive, just in terms of getting the message out and I suppose normalising for people, that it's okay to let grass grow a bit longer. It's okay to plant different things in local areas. So all the resources are freely available to download online. As I say, we've got copies here today if people want to take them. Just to finish up, I want to say, we didn't have to do a pollinator plan. We didn't do it for the crack. We were trying to do something that was going to work. So tracking whether or not it is working is a huge part of it. And we're going to try to do that in 3 ways. So the first way is that there's 81 actions in the plan. The responsibility for those 81 is shared out between all the partners. And once a year, they have to report back on what they've done against their action. And that's made publicly available online, that report. So you can see that. The second way that we'll track progress is we've developed an online mapping system in the National Biodiversity Data Centre where you can go in and draw around your site, whether it's a park, a roadside verge, a farm, a garden, and say what it is that you've done. So we've got a way to track the resources, the food and shelter going back into the landscape. And then obviously we need to track changes in the pollinators. If we're not seeing more healthy honeybees, if we're not seeing more bumblebees, more solitary bees, then the plan's not working. We have to check, we have to see if that's happening, and if it's not, then we have to address that. I suppose the positive thing about the second report under number 1 there was published just before Christmas. Saying we were overwhelmed really by the amount of support the plan got, but then you kind of think, well, people put their money where their mouth is and actually do what they've said they're going to do. And thankfully they have. So the second annual report, it showed that 91% of all the actions are either completed or in train. So that's really positive. So we are making a lot of progress on that, thankfully. Just to say a tiny bit about the mapping system that we've developed. It's called Actions for Pollinators. You can get it at pollinators.biodiversityireland.ie. So it's an online mapping system. You can go in, probably can't see it very clearly there, but you can search by types. You can search all the council actions. You can search all the garden actions and see, sites where people are doing something. You can search by the action types. You can see all the areas where people have reduced mowing, all the areas where they've, eliminated pesticide use and so on. And the idea is that, it provides local coordination. So if everyone was using it, you could see everything that was happening locally. We could better coordinate with each other. And also, really importantly, it provides recognition, to all those people who are helping. With each of these dots, then you can click on and it tells you what's happening at that site. So that's just a roundabout in Wexford, and if you can't see the detail, but it's telling you that 2,000 pollinator-friendly bulbs were planted. Again, this is another site, Park and Pubble in Port Leash. And again, you can get the details of what it is that they did on that site. If you want to use it, it's really easy. You just go in, you register to use it, and then you draw around your site. Tell it what type it is, and this box pops up, and then you fill it in. And the box then links into the guideline documents. So you say what you've done against the guideline documents. So you can't go rogue, you can't decide yourself, I suppose, what's good for pollinators and stick that in. We've tried to structure it so that people are following the guidelines and saying what they're done, because they're all, evidence-based. And again, just, to stress the point, it's about trying to provide local coordination. This is Buncrana in Donegal, and, full credit to George McDermott there in the County Council, who's been doing a lot, and it's a really good example of the council and the local tidy towns group working together. So just on the map, the blue is the County Council and the pink is the tidy towns group. And again, it's a good way to show what each are doing and to help them, coordinate better together. So, if it's used, it is a good way to capture progress. I suppose the thing is we do need people to use it. And we only launched it last year, so it's really still in its early days. But, we would ask that if you are doing something, please just log in and tell us what it is, both so you can get recognition and also so that we can, coordinate better together. Then just lastly, we need to track changes in the pollinators themselves. Obviously, that's kind of the bread and butter of the National Biodiversity Data Centre. One of the key schemes we'll use is the All Ireland Bumblebee Monitoring Scheme. That's a citizen science scheme where people sign up. You don't have to have any prior knowledge or anything like that. You sign up and you agree to walk a fixed route once a month. So 1 to 2 kilometres, you agree to walk a fixed route once a month and record the bumblebees that you see and how many of them there were. And I can't tell you how important that scheme is for letting us track what's actually happening with wild pollinators in the landscape. I honestly can't stress how important or how valuable the data that kind of scheme generates. And it lets us develop really, really rigorous graphs to show what's actually happening with the wild pollinators. And obviously it's going to then be invaluable as we move forward in terms of seeing whether the pollinator plan is working or not. So we're always looking for new volunteers. So if people are interested, please do get in touch. The scheme is run by my colleague, Dr. Tomas Murray. I know he's doing some training for OPW next month, and if there were local authorities who wanted to get Bumblebee Monitoring Scheme training, there's no reason why we couldn't facilitate that and come and deliver it for you. So just to finish up, if there's a problem, what do? I think you have to decide if it's important, critically assess how serious it is, identify what's causing it. I think you then have to collectively agree some sort of positive framework to address it, and then identify what evidence-based actions are going to help. You need to then communicate those and develop a partnership approach to try and deliver them, and then track progress. Is what you're trying to solve, is what you're trying to do, is it working? And so that's what we've been trying to do with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And I often get asked, can you solve this problem? And I honestly think that we can. We definitely can, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take me and you in our gardens. It's going to take people on farms. It's going to take people in local authorities. It will take all of us. None of us have to do a lot, but we all have to do a wee bit. And if we did that, we could solve this problem. It is serious, and the longer we wait, the bigger the challenge. But we absolutely can solve this problem. So how can you help? I suppose you'll find out today the things that local authorities and councils can do. Again, if you're going home to farms, to gardens, to businesses, take some guidelines and see if there's things that you could do there on a personal basis. Help us raise awareness, take some of the junior plans for kids or grandchildren that you might have at home. Or get involved with the Bumblebee Monitoring Scheme and, help us track changes in our wild pollinators. Just lastly, I want to say there's a lot of people in this audience who have been championing the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. in, you know, the spheres that they work within. And I just want to say to those people, I'm not going to name them because I can see you right throughout the audience, to be honest. I just want to say to you, we are very aware of what you do. We're very conscious of how important what you do is. We're very grateful for the help that you give it. So I just want to say thank you to all those people who have been championing the plan. We couldn't do it without you. So it is a call to action. I would say, you know, you don't have to do it for the bees. You could be doing it for the farmers and the growers that depend on them. You could do it for the wild plants. You could do it for the birds and the mammals that need the fruits and seeds of those wild plants. Or just do it for ourselves and being able to go into a shop and buy an Irish apple or an Irish strawberry, or grow your own at home. So thank you.